191 days. More time in combat than any other American unit in World War I. They never lost a foot of ground. Never had a man taken prisoner. France gave them their highest military honor. But when they came home to America in 1919, they faced lynchings, riots, and the worst racial violence this nation had ever seen. This is the untold story of the Harlem Hellfighters. Welcome back to African Tales by JONA-LORE. I'm bringing you the real history they refused to teach. This Black History Month, we're honoring the warriors who fought two wars, one against Germany and one against racism in their own country. If you're ready to discover how Black soldiers saved democracy in France only to be denied it at home, hit that subscribe button right now. This isn't just history. This is the legacy of courage that changed everything. Turn on those notifications because we're just getting started. Let me take you back to 1916, Harlem, New York. The African American community had been pushing for years to create their own National Guard regiment, but white politicians blocked it. Again, and again, and again. According to Professor Jeffrey Sammons, historian at New York University and co-author of Harlem's Rattlers and the Great War, the resistance from the white New York National Guard was fierce. They didn't want black men in uniform. They didn't want black men with military training. But history had other plans. On June 2, 1913, the New York State Legislature finally passed a bill authorizing an African American National Guard regiment. Governor William Sulzer signed it into law, and the 15th New York National Guard Regiment was born. But here's the catch. It existed in name only. No funding, no armory, no equipment. Just a piece of paper. It wasn't until June 1916 that Governor Charles Whitman appointed William Hayward, his former campaign manager and a white officer, to actually organize the unit. 200 African American residents of Harlem formed the Corps. They trained at Lafayette Hall on 7th Avenue and 132nd Street because they had no armory. Recruitment was slow. Despite endorsements from the New York Age, one of the most influential black newspapers of the era, enlistment lagged. Then something changed. In September 1916, a man named James Reese Europe enlisted. James Reese Europe wasn't just any soldier. He was one of the finest musicians in America. But according to Britannica's military history archives, Hayward convinced Europe to form a regimental band, giving him $10,000 and complete creative freedom. Europe spent months recruiting the country's finest musicians. He even led a trip to Puerto Rico to fill his reed section. That band would change the world. They would introduce jazz to France. But first, they had to survive America. When America entered World War I on April 6, 1917, the 15th, New York was the first unit in New York City to reach full strength, over 2,000 men. Volunteers poured in from Manhattan, Brooklyn, Long Island, upstate New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and as far as Virginia. After training at Camp Whitman in upstate New York, the regiment was sent to Spartanburg, South Carolina. And this is where their first battle began. The mayor of Spartanburg openly declared, according to NPR's documentary research, if any of those colored soldiers go in any of our soda stores and ask to be served, they'll be knocked down. We have our customs down here, and we aren't going to alter them. Think about that. These men were preparing to defend their country, and their own countrymen threatened to assault them for asking for a soda. Just weeks earlier, another African American regiment's arrival had sparked a race riot in Houston. Tensions in Spartanburg were explosive. Author Max Brooks, who wrote the graphic novel The Harlem Hellfighters, described it as a powder keg. The whole nation was keyed up for another race riot. But Colonel Hayward gave his troops an order that would define them: face racism with fortitude and without retaliation. These men showed what Max Brooks called restraint, that rivaled any soldier in history. They endured racial taunts, physical violence, constant humiliation. Noble Sissel, the regiment's drum major, recalled in his memoir, "There had been all kinds of insults hurled at our body who were on duty in town. And they didn't break." In December 1917, the 15th New York shipped out to France. They arrived expecting to fight. Instead, according to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, they were put to work unloading ships. The white American military establishment didn't believe black men could fight. As Max Brooks documented, they did not think that African Americans had the intelligence to think clearly. So these trained soldiers became laborers, again. But France was desperate. They needed soldiers. And unlike America, France was willing to let black men fight. On March 1, 1918, the regiment was redesignated as the 369th United States Infantry and assigned to the French Army's 16th Division, 4th Army. According to the New York State Military Museum archives, they turned in their American equipment and were issued French Berthier rifles and French uniforms. After just 3 weeks of training with French tactics, on April 8, 1918, the 369th entered the trenches. And they would not leave the front lines for 191 consecutive days, longer than any other American unit in the entire war. Let me be clear about what this means. According to Arthur W. Little, who served as a battalion commander and wrote the regimental history, "From Harlem to the Rhine, it was official. 191 days under fire. They never lost a foot of ground. Never had a man taken prisoner. On 2 occasions, men were captured but were immediately recovered." May 15, 1918. Pre-dawn hours. 2 soldiers, Private Henry Johnson and Private Needham Roberts, were on sentry duty at an isolated observation post on the edge of the Argonne Forest when a German raiding party attacked. According to historical records from the American Battle Monuments Commission, Johnson and Roberts faced at least 24 German soldiers. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they fought. Johnson used his rifle until it jammed. Then he used his bolo knife. He killed multiple German soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. He saved Roberts from being captured. He sustained 21 wounds, and he never stopped fighting. The French government awarded both men the Croix de Guerre, France's highest military honor. Johnson became the first American to receive it in World War I. But America? America didn't even give him a Purple Heart. Not then. Throughout the summer of 1918, the 369th fought in some of the bloodiest battles of the war. According to U.S. Army Center of Military History records, they participated in the Champagne-Marne, Meuse-Argonne, Champagne 1918, and Alsace 1918 campaigns. The French called them Hommes de Bronze, men of bronze. The Germans, according to multiple historical accounts, called them Hollenkämpfer, Hellfighters. The name stuck. Colonel William Hayward, their white commander, famously said, "My men never retire. They go forward or they die." And they did. The Second Battle of the Marne, Chateau Thierry, Belleau Wood, the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Every major Allied counteroffensive, they were there. On September 26, 1918, the 369th participated in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. According to the American Battle Monuments Commission, in just days of advancing and capturing towns and railroad junctions, the regiment suffered 851 casualties. 851. The total casualties for the regiment reached 1,400, more than any other American regiment in World War I. According to multiple historical sources, they suffered approximately 1,500 battle casualties overall. But they kept fighting. November 20th, 1918. The 369th became the first Allied regiment, not just American, but of all the Allied armies, to reach the Rhine River in Germany. The war ended, and the French honored them. According to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the French government awarded the Croix de Guerre to 171 individual members of the regiment. The entire unit received a Croix de Guerre citation. Some soldiers received the Distinguished Service Cross from the United States, but it would take nearly a century for America to truly honor them. In 2015, 97 years after his actions on the battlefield, President Barack Obama posthumously awarded Private Henry Johnson the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. In 2021, President Joe Biden signed the Harlem Hellfighters Congressional Gold Medal Act into law, Congress's highest award. Finally, February 17, 1919, Fifth Avenue, New York City. According to the New York Tribune, the crowds were two solid walls of booming, roaring welcomers. Tens of thousands of New Yorkers lined the streets. The soldiers were decorated with flowers, like brides. The New York Sun reported on what they called the city's first homecoming parade for troops returning from the Great War. And leading them was Lieutenant James Reese Europe's 100-piece band, playing jazz, the music that would transform the world. Melville Miller, who was 16 when he enlisted, recalled decades later in the 1977 documentary Men of Bronze. That day, the sun was shining, and we were marching, and the band was playing. Everybody's head was high, and we were all proud to be Americans, proud to be black, and proud to be in the 15th New York Infantry. They marched up Fifth Avenue and into Harlem. They were heroes for exactly one day, because here's what they didn't tell you. Before they left for war, they had been refused permission to participate in New York's National Guard farewell parade, the Rainbow Division, they called it. And according to the Smithsonian National Museum, an official stated, black is not a color in the rainbow. So they couldn't march with white soldiers when they left, but they could march alone when they returned. That should have told them everything. Within months, the celebration ended. The truth revealed itself. The Red Summer of 1919. According to historian Chad Williams, author of Torchbearers of Democracy, and research compiled by the Equal Justice Initiative, between May and November 1919, at least 25 race riots erupted across America. Over 250 Black Americans were killed. 53 African Americans were lynched. 12 of them were World War I veterans. In Arkansas, unwounded 369th veteran Leroy Johnston and his 3 brothers were killed in the Elaine Massacre, the deadliest racial confrontation in that state's history. W.E.B. Du Bois, the brilliant scholar and civil rights leader who had encouraged black men to support the war effort, wrote a searing editorial in the Crisis magazine in May 1919 titled, "Returning Soldiers." Let me read his words, because they matter. "This is the country to which we, soldiers of democracy, return. This is the fatherland for which we fought. But it is our fatherland. It was right for us to fight. The faults of our country are our faults. Under similar circumstances, we would fight again. But, by the God of heaven, we are cowards and jackasses if now that war is over, and we do not marshal every ounce of our brain and brawn to fight a sterner, longer, more unbending battle against the forces of hell in our own land." Then he wrote the words that would become a rallying cry, "We return. We return from fighting. We return fighting. Make way for democracy. We saved it in France, and by the great Jehovah, we will save it in the United States of America, or know the reason why. Federal postal officials were so frightened by this editorial that they withheld its distribution for 6 days. Think about that. Black men could fight and die for America. But when they demanded equality, the government tried to silence them. Henry Johnson, the hero who fought off 24 Germans with a knife, came home to nothing. He spoke publicly about the racism and cowardice of white soldiers, and he was pushed out of the spotlight. He struggled. He died 10 years later, in 1929, of an enlarged heart. He died poor. He died forgotten. It took America 67 years to give him a Purple Heart, 97 years to give him the Medal of Honor. Professor Jeffrey Sammons explained the fear white America felt. There's a great deal of trepidation about these guys who have been trained to kill and had been transformed by their war experience and their interaction with people on a global stage. The question became, how are we going to return blacks to the status quo after the war? The answer was violence, terror, lynching, riots. But it didn't work, because, as Du Bois said, they returned fighting. The Harlem Hellfighters proved something America didn't want to admit. Black men were not just equal to white soldiers. In many ways, they surpassed them. 191 days under fire, 1,400 casualties, never lost ground, never lost a prisoner, honored by France, feared by Germany, ignored by their own country for a century. But their legacy lives on. The 369th Sustainment Brigade serves today. The regiment's spirit endures. And every February, we remember. Here's what I need from you. Don't just hit the like button. I need you to think deeply and answer this in the comments. They fought for democracy abroad, but were denied it at home. We're in 2026 now. Has anything really changed? Are we still fighting the same battles? Drop your honest thoughts below. No emojis. Real conversation. And here's the thing. This story gets erased. It gets minimized. It gets forgotten. So share this video with someone who needs to see it. Tag someone in the comments who needs to know this history. Hit that subscribe button because African Tales by JONA-LORE is committed to telling the stories they don't want you to know. The Harlem Hellfighters were extraordinary, but they should have been ordinary. They should have been treated like every other American soldier who served with honor. The fact that they weren't tells you everything you need to know about America in 1919. And maybe, if we're honest, about America today. Remember their names, honor their sacrifice, and keep fighting. Stay blessed. Never forget. We return fighting.